Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating collection of historical sermons known as the Journal of Discourses, and we're going to explore its pretty complicated legacy. And to really get our heads around this, let's start with the big question. What happens when an organization's past clashes with its present? Honestly, this is the central tension we're going to be digging into through the story of these remarkable documents. So first things first, what exactly is the Journal of Discourses? Well, it's this massive 26-volume collection of sermons given by the early leaders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And it all started with a guy named George D. Watt. He was a stenographer who had this idea to get these speeches out to church members who lived way too far from Salt Lake City to hear them in person. And so they were published between 1854 and 1886. And to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about here, the final work spans an incredible 26 volumes. And packed inside those volumes, you'll find 1,438 separate speeches. I mean, that's everything from funeral sermons and temple dedications to, believe it or not, even some court proceedings. And this wasn't just a few top guys talking. Nope, the journal captures the voices of 55 different speakers, from church presidents and apostles all the way to other prominent members of the early church. But here's where it gets really interesting. When you look at who was doing all the talking, some voices were, let's say, a lot more prominent than others. Out of almost 1,500 speeches, just a handful of men gave the majority of them. President Brigham Young alone gave a staggering 390 sermons. Okay, so that's what it is. But how did people actually view these sermons back in the 19th century? Understanding the kind of authority they had at the time is absolutely crucial to this whole story. See, back then, when leaders like Brigham Young spoke, it wasn't just, some good advice. Their words were seen as direct, they were seen as authoritative, and for members of the church, they were binding. And look, we don't even have to guess about this. Brigham Young himself laid it all out there. He declared right in the journal that his approved sermons were, and I quote, as good scripture as is couched in this Bible. That is a seriously powerful statement about how he saw his own words. All right, now let's hit the fast forward button and jump to today, because the official position of the modern LDS Church paints a very, very different picture. They framed the journal as, well, more of an unofficial record. According to the church's own official website, the Journal of Discourses is explicitly described as, quote, not an authoritative source of church doctrine. I mean, wow, that's a huge shift from how things were seen in the 19th century. And boom, right there, you see the central conflict laid bare. On one side, you've got the historical view from Brigham Young himself. These words are scripture. And on the other, you have the modern institutional view. Nope, not an authoritative source for doctrine. So, you gotta ask, why the big shift? Well, the modern church brings up a few key concerns. They point out that it wasn't an official church publication and that, without modern recording tech, there was a real risk of mistakes in transcription. In fact, they state that some pretty significant errors have been found over the years. So this clash, this collision between the past and the present, it creates what you could call the authority dilemma. And it kicks up some really complex theological questions that people are still debating today. Let's just break down the core problem here, step by step. It's pretty straightforward, really. 1. Early leaders claimed they were speaking with God's authority. 2. Those exact same recorded statements are now considered unofficial. And that leads you right to step 3. It naturally raises questions about any doctrines that might have come from those statements. So, where does that leave us? It brings us right to the heart of the journal's contested legacy. How do you make sense of a collection of texts that is, at the same time, both revered and questioned? But here's the thing. While there's plenty of debate on the theological side, there's one thing that pretty much everyone agrees on. No matter how you feel about its doctrinal authority, the Journal of Discourses is an incredibly important, invaluable source of history. It's a direct window into those early years of the LDS organization. And that right there is probably the best way to think about it. The Journal of Discourses lives in this unique space. It's a vital historical record that preserves the voices of the past, and at the exact same time, it's a source of living, ongoing theological debate. And that kind of leaves all of us with a much bigger question, doesn't it? One that goes way beyond just this topic. How should any of us balance the wisdom and the words of the past with the realities and the understanding of the present? It's a challenge we all have to deal with, one way or another.